Well, good morning, everyone. We're up for our next podcast, and our special guest is County Commissioner Bill Braswell. I had the pleasure of serving with Bill for 2 years when I was a county commissioner from 16 to 18. I was term limited out, and he's done about 8 years now, 8 years.
8.
And
or 7. Yeah.
So I've asked Bill to come on the podcast and tell us a little bit about himself and ask him a few questions. And, we'll hear some stories about his life and his professional life and some of his philosophies about, what's going on here in Polk County. So
Thanks,
welcome,
Todd.
Bill.
Yep.
We're glad you're here.
Glad
Thank
to
you
be
for
here.
taking the time.
Appreciate the opportunity.
You sound very familiar, like I've talked to you recently, but I don't
know.
remember the last time we've had a chance to talk. But
I don't know.
your voice is, maybe it's the microphones that's giving you a little bit more of a baritone.
I've never been here before, and I think this is the first time we met.
Yep, I think so.
Yeah.
So you grew up in Bartow?
Yep.
Is that where you born and raised there too?
Born and raised in Bartow.
You grew up there, I'm assuming, the whole time?
Yep. Mom and Dad were there. I've got an older sister. She still lives there. Went to Bartow or Floral Avenue Elementary, Bartow Junior High School, Bartow High School.
So you were a yellow jacket.
Yep. I was, and it's small town. I think back then the population was like 13, 14, 15,000.
Yep.
And I loved it. It was a great town. We lived right in town. I lived right across the street from McLeod Park.
Okay.
So I had a
don't know where that
playground,
is.
and it's right in the middle of town.
Right in the middle?
Yeah. Had a playground across the street, and all the kids were over there all day. So, it was heaven.
So what were you like as a little kid? Were you a neighborhood bully? Were you pretty compliant? Were you just kind of a happy-go-lucky kid that enjoyed things?
Probably happy-go-lucky would describe it. Pretty shy.
Yeah?
Didn't get out much. Just wasn't really comfortable, talking or hanging out. I just was kind of one of those shy guys.
So it was just you and your sister? Were you the only two kids in your family?
Yeah. We're 10 years apart. So,
okay.
She left home at 18 or 19, and, from 9 on, I was...
You ruled the roost.
What do you call it, a latchkey kid? My mom and dad, they both worked.
Where did they work?
My dad worked for W.R. Grace, a
Okay.
phosphate company,
Yeah.
and my mom was a sectionizer for Ben Hill Griffin.
Okay, good.
And, they were working. I'd let myself, I didn't fix myself breakfast. It would be ready. But
Right.
I'd send myself off to school and came back home and let myself in. And, of course, back then I got on my bike and see you later. I'll be back sometime before, bedtime.
So how were you in high school? Were you a good student? Or did you play athletic? No, not a good student.
Not a good student. I've always, when it comes to academics, I'm a 2.0.
I got you beat. I'm a 2.2.
Okay.
So
well,
I'm...
Never really saw the reason to excel in academics.
So you never did?
Nah. So never was, what do you call that, honor society.
Or Mensa or any of the other brainiac things?
Yeah, definitely not Mensa. Can't even spell it. But and I played, growing up, I played baseball, Little League, Pony League, all that. Really enjoyed it. But, like kids do, I got burnt out on it. I started playing golf.
I didn't know you were golfing.
Really got into golf.
Are you any good?
Not anymore, but I played on the high school golf team.
Really?
And I've played golf all my life up until probably the last 5 years, and it's just got where it hurts my back so bad, it's not worth the pain. And Rick Wilson and I went out and played a few times, and I thought I'd gotten...
Commissioner.
Yeah, Commissioner Wilson, and I thought I'd gotten pretty bad until I saw him.
He made you feel really good.
Yeah, it made me want to go play golf again. But
he always carries 24 dozen in the back of his bag.
He's got a hole in his pocket. He's
one of those.
Yeah, he's one of those guys.
So after high school, did you go directly into college?
Yeah.
Where'd you go to college? Fraternity, major?
Yeah.
What were you?
I went to Polk Community College back then. I left Polk Community College after a while. I went over to University of South Florida. Mm-hmm. And then eventually wound up going to the University of Florida. And I actually graduated. I'm real pleased with that.
Me too.
And up there when I was going to school, I was an AGR. I've got a degree in agronomy, so it was
Alpha Gamma Rho.
Alpha Gamma Rho.
Which is kind of the ag fraternity.
Yep. We've got the plow on the wall up there on 13th Street. But, again, a 2.0. Actually, I think I had to stick around.
I was 2.3. I improved in college.
Yeah, you were moving. You were advancing faster than I was.
I was on a fast track to success.
Well, actually, I believe, if my recollection is correct, I had to stick around an extra semester to get it to a 2.0.
Well,
You know,
it took me 5 years too.
No, I did it in 4 years, but I had to take some basket weaving classes to get that higher grade, to get the grade point average up.
I think I told other people, I said, after 4 years, my dad sat me down on his bed and he said, "Son, when do you plan on graduating?" And I said, "Dad, I'm switching majors. I'm going into marketing. I'm getting out of finance, and I'll be out in a year."
And I'll tell you, when
I did very well in marketing, the finance was just tough for me.
And when I went to college, I had no idea what I wanted to do.
Right.
Honestly, even when I graduated, obviously I didn't go into agriculture then. And it got down to a point where you got to pick a major. And I'm like, I don't know, what starts with A? Agriculture sounded good. So
Astrophysicists were probably not in your future.
That was way out of there. Yeah.
So you didn't anticipate a career in agriculture going up there?
Nope.
Were you already in AGR when you declared your major, or did you have your major of agronomy and then say, "Hey, I probably should be around people who kind of do what I do"?
Just that. Yeah. Okay. I figured out what I was going to do. Well, actually, one of the guys that works here at your real estate firm, Brian Beasley, is my big brother.
Is he really?
In my fraternity. And
we grew up together in Winter Haven.
Well, that story, Brian and I worked at the experiment station over in Lake Alfred.
Okay.
And, again, I didn't know what I was going to do. I was doing that, in the summers. And it seemed like a good thing to do. And Brian said, you ought to go to the University of Florida and get an ag degree. And I hate to say Brian Beasley had that much influence on me, but apparently he did.
He motivated you to get that 2.0 and get accepted.
Yeah, exactly.
I look back and there's no way I would even get considered for the University of Florida with the grades I had. And
Impossible.
Thank God we were there when
Impossible.
You could get in with a C average.
Thank God you could get in with a C average, and they didn't have iPhones.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So at Florida, is that where you kind of got the bug? Hey, maybe I can fly. Maybe I want to try military as a future for me, or did you go right into the military?
No. So I was going to Florida, and I started dating a girl, and it was kind of interesting. She was a Gainesville girl. She wasn't going to the University of Florida, and her dad was retired from the Air Force. He was Richard Nixon's pilot.
Really?
And his best friend in the world was Roger Maris, who also lived in Gainesville. So
Maris Distributors.
Yeah. I'm a famous baseball player, right? So I could go over to their house and listen to him tell stories about, flying the president around the world while drinking beer with Roger Maris because he had the beer distributorship. Right. So I thought I was in heaven at the time. And I'm sitting there one night or one day, I can't remember, and he asked me, he goes, "What are you going to do with an ag degree?" He kind of turned his nose up at it like, that's kind of stupid. And I told him, I have no idea. I just got to get a degree. I got to go home with a degree of something. And he said, "What do you really want to do?" I go, what you do sounds pretty cool. And he's like, "Why don't you do it?" And honestly, to go back, my parents had not encouraged me to go to college. They thought it was a waste of time. They couldn't afford it. I worked 3 jobs while I was going to college. They wanted me to go to work at the phosphate mine and be happy with that. And nobody had really ever said, "What do you really want to do?" And I thought about it, and I thought that's really cool. So I started taking flying lessons at the university. They had a flying club called the Flying Gators.
Really? I didn't know that.
And I went there and started flying, and then one of my jobs was cleaning airliners at night for
out of the Gainesville Airport.
Eastern Airlines came in there, and a friend of yours, Brad Clark, I believe you guys were fraternity brothers. Brad and I.
Brad was a couple years older. His brother Brian, who kicked for the Gators, he was
sort of kicked for the Gators.
Yeah, but he did. He was on the field, and he was a fraternity brother.
Yeah,
he was more my age.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So Brad and I, we cleaned airplanes at night. So that's when I really got the idea of being a pilot would be a really cool job, and one thing led to another. Now I didn't go right into flying out of that.
But you enlisted into the Air Force?
No. I moved to Atlanta.
Okay.
Brad and I moved to Atlanta. And it was they were going to open up the new Hartsfield Airport. It was still the old airport.
Right.
We both were still working for Eastern. We needed full-time jobs. We graduated from college. We had no idea what we wanted to do. Well, Brad did. He wanted to work for Eastern. And we go up there, and I got a job. I was working over in air freight, and then I transferred. And it's kind of cool. I thought it was really cool at the time. I transferred over to Concourse C in the tower, and I was, 22 years old, directing air traffic on the ground, which was just a blast. And
did they do background checks before you got that call?
thank God. Yeah, but
Life changed, hasn't it?
yeah. But anyway, yeah. So I did that, and again, I'm just sitting around one day, and Brad had moved in with his girlfriend, and I had another roommate, and this guy's like, why don't you become an airline pilot? You like what you're doing now? It sounds like a cool thing to do. And I knew I had no experience. I mean, I did have my private pilot's license, but that was it. So I went to an Air Force recruiter. I thought, well, this is the way to get in. And I went to right there in Atlanta, go in. Sergeant Goins was the guy's name. And I said, I want to be an Air Force pilot. And he said, you and about 500,000 other people. You don't stand a chance. You don't have any connections.
Wow, what a recruiter.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he was honest. And he said, you got to take some tests. So I went down to Robins Air Force Base, took the test, did real well on that. Didn't get a 2.0, did a little better. And came back, and he's like, sorry. He goes, I get like two pilot slots a year. You'd be number 75. And I'm like, well, that stinks. So, scratching my head on what to do. At the same time, I was living in Atlanta having a good time, so I wasn't in a big rush to get there anyway. Well, I knew a friend of mine had graduated from Florida and had gone to work for Lawton Childs. And I guess you'd say this is my first understanding of how politics works. And because one thing the guy had told me, the recruiter had told me, he said, the pilot slots are for politicians' sons and, rich people and that sort of thing. So I knew I wasn't rich.
Of which you were neither.
yeah. And but I could try to pull the politics lever. So I called up there. She set up, of all the people on the planet, Lawton Childs and Sam Nunn were good buddies.
Really?
At that time, Sam Nunn was the Senate chairman of the Armed Services Committee. So he probably had a little bit of sway with the military. So I have this meeting. She tells me, buy a suit. Didn't own one. Go to Belk Lindsay's, bought the cheapest polyester suit I could. Fly up to Washington. It was crazy. The meetings, this guy started taking meetings like at 6 a.m. and I'm number one. So I walk in there. In the waiting room, there's like the president of General Dynamics and the CEO of Boeing. I mean, it was
and
crazy.
Bill Braswell from Bartow.
Yeah. I walk in.
Boys, I'm here.
Yeah. And I went to the front of the line. So I go in. Sam Nunn shakes my hand, basically says, yeah, great job. Glad you're so ambitious. Here, talk to Donna. And boom. The whole time with Sam Nunn was 15 seconds at the most. She takes me into a little office. I go in there. She asks a bunch of questions, fill out some paperwork, and that's it. And I'm like, geez, this is
I wasted $27 on a suit.
Well, and that was my first thought. Can I return the suit? I've only worn it once. They didn't hem the pants, so I'm probably good. But I wasn't going to get the money back on the airplane ticket. So I went home and kind of wrote the whole thing off. And let me say, I didn't come from a military family. My dad was medically disqualified from World War II, so I didn't really know anything about the military. Well, it wasn't 5 days later after I got back home, a colonel from Maxwell Air Force Base calls me, and he says, congratulations, you've got a pilot slot. We'll be sending you to officer training school on such and such a date. And, me not knowing anything about the military, this guy didn't mean it. Private colonel didn't mean anything to me. And I go, wait a minute, buddy. I've got a lot of stuff planned for the summer. Can we push this off to the fall? And I'm sure he probably fell out of his chair. Nobody had ever said that to him in his life. But anyway, he goes, I'll get back to you. Calls me back the next day. He's like, hey, how about August 5th? I go, that works. I'll take that slot.
I can squeeze you in.
Yeah, I can squeeze you in. So then I win the Air Force. And
how long were you in the military active?
I did 7 years and 3 months on active duty. And when I got off active duty, I went into the reserves where I did another 15 years.
So I'm interested is when you went into the military, how long did it take for you to become a pilot? I mean,
Yeah.
is that like day one you start doing pilot stuff?
No.
Or,
I mean,
for the first year you do regular stuff and then you start specializing?
well, first you got to become an officer. I wasn't even an officer. So the way it works is you have to have a college degree to be an officer.
Right.
It doesn't matter what it's in. I had that. So I went to officer training school. That's 90 days. They called us 90-day wonders. And so that was, until the fall.
How long does it take to get into OCS? I mean, do you have to spend a year as enlisted or?
No, you go in, the enlisted guys treat you like an officer from day one.
Oh, okay.
And they they don't and they do, they know that you may be their boss someday, so that they wear kid gloves with you, but you got to learn to march. Right. You got to learn, what does all that stuff mean? All the acronyms, all the nonsense. Right. And not that there's any nonsense, but
right, I know
but and you got to get that discipline. So you go 90 days and either you graduate or you don't, and then after that you go do the job you're going to do, because most of the guys that I was in officer training school with weren't going to be pilots. They're going to be officers in maintenance units. We had a lot of AWACS people going through stuff like that. And so you do your 90 days, and then you get a pilot slot. I was sent to Del Rio, Texas, which is the edge of the earth. And it's 3 hours west of San Antonio, right on the Mexican border. And went there, and pilot training is basically a year. So you spend 50 weeks learning. You start in jets. You start with what, back then, I don't know what they do now, but we started with a T-37, which if you want to see what one looks like, it's on a stick in front of the Bartow airport. And then you go to T-38s, which I believe they still fly them, and they're real sporty.
T standing for trainer.
Yeah, they're a sports car. And did that, and you get out, and then you get your assignment. My first assignment, and I don't want to say I'm manipulative or anything like that, but somewhere in there I figured out where this assignment thing was going. And you get, back then they called it FARD. It meant that you were fighter, attack, reconnaissance, something else qualified. And if you got FARD, and if you didn't want a fighter, you were not welcome in the Air Force anymore. And I didn't want a fighter. I knew fighters were not where the airline pilots were coming from at the time. So I knew what I wanted. Well, I got a F-111, which is a fighter bomber to Mountain Home Air Force Base. What's that, Idaho or some godforsaken place. And I wasn't that far from San Antonio, which is where the decisions are being made. So I went up there and found out who made these decisions, and it was just some captain, and followed him around, stalked him a little bit, saw that he liked to play racquetball. I like to play racquetball. Just happened to be at the gym the same time he's playing racquetball, and said, "Hey, I got an FB-111. Any chance of changing that?" And he's like, "Sure." And right there, he changed it to what I would call my dream job, which was a C-9, which was nothing more than a McDonnell Douglas DC-9 airliner.
C standing for cargo?
Yeah, well, it was a flying
transport. Or?
Yeah, it was a flying hospital.
Okay.
It was 2 pilots. We had a flight mechanic that flew along with us to fuel the plane, that sort of stuff, and then we had 5 nurses in the back. And we just moved sick people, injured people, kind of all around the planet, but mostly in the U.S.
Right.
Yeah. And then I went to C5s in the reserves.
Okay.
That was a kick, big change. But I went to C5s, and at the same time I went to work for Delta Airlines.
What's the hardest plane you've ever flown, or most difficult? Challenging, whatever word you want to use.
I think when I got to the T-38 in training, it does not fly like an airplane. It has no wings. I mean, there's these little stubby things out there. You pull back on the stick, and it doesn't smoothly do anything. It shakes like you dropped one wheel off in a ditch. I'd never expected that in an airplane, so that was pretty challenging. Other than that, they're all kind of basically the same. I will say a C5 at one point in time was the largest plane on the planet. It's like 250 feet long and 250 feet wide. And
were you left seat or right seat?
Both. But the bigger they are, the easier they are to fly. I mean, C5, you can just grease that thing on. It's got 28 wheels, and the struts compress. So when they're extended, you've got basically about 8 feet of cushion that you land on as you touch down. So that plane was fun. Got to go all over the planet. Got to go to Iraq and Afghanistan and all those glamour spots. It was a lot of fun. Both were fun. I will say, the years I was on active duty were the most fun years.
It's like very rewarding for you.
Man, and it was. I was probably headed down a not a good path. When I came out of college, and it put me on a good path. Obviously, the discipline kicks in, and you have to have it. And it was just so much fun. I just couldn't believe it. And even when I became an airline pilot, I'm like, this isn't work.
Right.
This is just absolute fun.
So when you left active duty, is that when you applied? You flew for Delta, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So is that when you immediately rotated in to start and fly for Delta? You're doing your 1 weekend a month as a reserve or whatever the requirement was. On the Air Force side.
Before I even got off active duty, you have terminal leave that you can build up. I think I had 90 days of terminal leave. So I went to work before I was actually off active duty. I got out at a great time. I applied to every airline. I got hired by every airline. They were desperate for military pilots.
Right.
And just to hire me, they had to be desperate, right? But
no, I didn't say that. You're obviously a good pilot.
But anyway, went to work there, and and then the way it works in the regular reserves, it's one thing. If you're a pilot in the reserves, it's another thing. And the way it worked with us was, you got your airline schedule, and then you would send that up to your squadron and say, find me a trip, work it around these days. But the funny part about that, and it wasn't so funny to the guys involved, I actually got, when you the military has its ways of doing things, and orders are what you get that assigns you to different jobs. So I got my orders to C5 training, and that was in Altus, Oklahoma. And when I got my orders there, I'm assigned to that unit. At that same time, my unit back in Dover, Delaware, got assigned to active duty. They were all called up to active duty, and they were forced back on active duty. But because I was there, I didn't get put on active duty. So I think training.
Even though your unit was.
Yeah.
Because you physically weren't there.
Yeah, and my paperwork said I wasn't there.
Right.
So I'm on active duty at Altus. They get put on active duty for desert, whatever it was at the time. And 45 days of training or whatever it is. I go back. They're on active duty, hating life, and I'm just popping in every now and then to fly a trip, and they did not like that at all. But they couldn't change it. Once they went on active duty, they couldn't add people, couldn't let you out. So
Todd's podcast is sponsored in part by SVN Saunders Ralston Dantzler Real Estate. Since 1996, the firm has offered unrivaled brokerage services throughout Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. With over 90 expert advisors throughout the region, our team has the knowledge and resources to help clients realize their most ambitious real estate investment goals. When you choose SVN Saunders Ralston Dantzler Real Estate, you have access to a diverse suite of commercial and land services, including forestry consulting, land management, auctions, property management, commercial leasing, and negotiating conservation easements. If you're seeking to invest in land or explore commercial real estate opportunities in the Southeast, contact us today at svnsaunders.com or call 877-518-5263 to connect with an advisor today. Once again, that's svnsaunders.com or by phone at 877-518-5263.
So let's talk about your airline career a little bit. What are the biggest myths about airline pilots? I mean, do personal electronics really mess up anything? They tell you to turn them off, they turn them on. Is it a way for them to sell it?
Total joke.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
it seems like it's relaxed a little bit. I don't fly.
No, it's relaxed a lot. But back in the day, my understanding was one time they thought maybe something was affected and they just banned it forever. I mean, it was overkill for a couple of decades there. So myths. I mean, I guess the biggest myth is airline pilots want to make out like it's a tough job, and it's probably the easiest thing you can do. You do the takeoff and landing yourself unless you're flying an Airbus, which you have to let the airplane do that.
Right.
And then you put it on autopilot, you put your feet up, put a newspaper across the windscreen so the sun doesn't come in, and you read the paper. I would leave my house with 30 pounds of magazines, because I was doing this before the iPad. So I've got 30 pounds of magazines, and I'd come back with no magazines. I just read magazines.
I appreciate that comment. I think it's got to be more difficult than that. Maybe day in and day out it's not, but when that alarm goes off, that's when you earn your money. And how do I land this thing with all these people on board and save this ship?
Yeah, and I mean, I had some weird things happen, and
what's some of the weirdest? You don't have to go to an hour.
Well, no. I mean, sucking birds in the engine and, shutting it down. A C5 is a hydraulic machine. We had all kind of hydraulic issues with C5s. Shutting engines down. But these things are so overpowered.
It's got to make you tighten a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
One engine down, it's like they were designed to fly with all of them, not 75%.
One thing about aviation is, they want every cockpit to look the same. And so everything, when the bell rings, you just routinely go through the process that you've trained for over and over and over. And you do. You go to simulators there at Delta. I think we did it twice a year. And you just repeat the same thing. And it's always the worst thing.
Like a bird shuts down engine.
Yeah, I mean,
what do you do?
It's always the same.
Goes
yeah,
out?
I mean, when you're running down the runway, there's a go, no-go speed. And you knew when you got to that go, no-go speed, they would wait 1 second. And now you got to go. And then all hell breaks loose. I mean, engines quit. Lights come on, bells go off. I mean, it scares you at first.
So as a terrified flyer, how often does that happen? Like,
hardly ever.
Hardly ever.
Hardly ever.
But you've got to train to be able to flip that switch from your muscle memory and
and you're right. That's what it is, muscle memory. And I can't. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And one thing that's interesting, or I find interesting, is I was an accident investigator in the Air Force. I went out to the University of Southern California for 9 months, and they taught you everything to know. Actually, that was some of the best aviation training I ever received, but it was fascinating to go back and look at all these accidents. We did a lot. We would investigate Navy accidents, and those guys are dropping them all over the place. And you look at the airliner accident rate back then. Of course, this is almost 40 years ago, 30 years ago. And look at it today, you wouldn't recognize it. Right. It is so much safer. Things just don't happen, and now computers run everything.
So when an accident happens, is it 50-50 pilot error versus mechanical, or is it 85 pilot that they just forgot or they ignored something, or is it usually something breaks and the pilot?
No, actually,
does a pretty good job.
The whole thing that was beat in our heads in school was, what's the root cause? Maybe the pilot screwed up, but why did he screw up?
Maybe he
was
tired,
he exhausted?
Right.
Whatever. Maybe he was dyslexic and got away with it for so long. But yeah, we would always go back and look at the root cause. But if you summarize all the accidents, it's always pilot error. Planes just don't break down that much. And even when they do, you got a 2-engine airplane and 1 engine quits, the pilot should be able to land it. And if he doesn't, it's pilot error. Yeah. So the pilot gets to blame on pretty much everything.
Well, my son is an A&P mechanic, and he had worked for Draken for a few years, and now he's working for, I think it's Amphibians Plus out of Bartow.
Right.
And
I know it.
So he talks to me about the mechanical side of it and what you just mentioned, and my eyes kind of glaze over. I learned a little bit from him, but it was, hey, if something happens, you got to figure out, did we mess up or did the pilot mess up? And maybe they didn't mess up. It just was a factor that the pilot got blamed.
Yeah, it's just a series of unfortunate circumstances that fall in line.
Any interesting stories happen when you were an airline pilot that you can share with us?
Sure. Yeah, I think I've got tons of
We don't have tons
stories.
of time.
Probably
Maybe for episode 4, 5, 6, and 7.
Yeah, I've told this story a few times, but one of the most interesting times was I was a 737 captain for Delta on 9/11, and I was actually descending to land into New York when the first tower got hit. And of course, like everybody else, I remember it vividly. The sky, there wasn't a cloud in the sky. It was real windy that day. I remember that. And then, an airliner hit the World Trade Center. You're thinking, what kind of goober? I mean, how can you do that?
That's really pilot error.
Yeah. I mean, I'd been in aircraft where neither pilot was flying and nobody was paying attention, but that didn't happen near the ground.
Right.
That was up in the air. And so, and of course the air traffic controllers immediately go hold here, go hold there. They're trying to sort it out. Then when the second one hit, the whole world, well, everybody in New York knew this is the real deal. And what most people don't realize is the aviation industry at that moment melted down. The controllers were losing control of the airplanes because there was no place for everybody to go. They didn't want to put anybody on the ground, but at the same time, they wanted everybody on the ground. So, the controllers, you could call a controller and they wouldn't respond. So as a captain, I, used my captain's authority and made a decision. We're not going to New York. I told the co-pilot, I said, look, dude, I think we're at war. I mean, something really bad is going on. In every airliner there, and I've been retired for 15 years, so it's probably better now. But we had a thing called ACARS, and it was how you communicated with your dispatcher. It was text messaging. ACARS melted down. You couldn't communicate with a dispatcher. Couldn't communicate with a controller. So we just turned the airplane, and because we were flying from Fort Lauderdale to New York, I knew we tankered fuel because fuel was really expensive in New York. So we had enough to get back to Fort Lauderdale. But my car was in Orlando. So I made the decision, we're going to where my car is, and that's the Orlando airport. So we turned. I just climbed up to 23,000 feet, which is for the average or normal jet. You'll get the fastest true airspeed at that flight level. And we just pointed directly at Orlando and headed back. Not really talking to any controllers. I called the passenger. It was morning, early in the morning. The passengers knew the sun had started on the right and now it was on the left. So I had to explain to them. But before I did that, what really was so bad to think about it, I called the lead flight attendant up. Of course, I opened the cockpit door, and you know how that could have ended. I called her up, and I said, "Hey, we're going to Orlando. There's been a problem in New York."
Did you make it all the way to New York till you saw it, or you just?
Yeah, no, we saw it.
Okay.
No, we were 30 miles out.
So you were on approach almost.
Yeah, we were on approach. We were on what's called an arrival, which it's a kind of a step down to the runway. And so anyway, so we're headed back, and I called the lead flight attendant before I made the announcement to the passengers, and I said, "Hey, the World Trade Tower's been hit by, both World Trade Towers have been hit by airliners," and she faints. And I'm like, crap, what's this all about? Talk about wilting under pressure. We get another flight attendant up in the cockpit. We had, the ammonia tablets. We get her back. Her son was on his first day of work at the World Trade Center.
Oh my God.
So she's a wreck, to say the least. We just get her, to the point where we can get her out of the cockpit, get her in the back of the plane. Of course, she comes out weeping, and now I got to make an announcement to the people. But I told them, I told the passenger, I think, America may be at war. We're going back. We're going to go as far as we can away from this city. I'm trying to get to Orlando. I know that's not what you want, but that's what I want, and that's where we're going. So we took off as fast as we could. We were pretty much just south and east of the Pentagon when it got hit. So we had we didn't have TVs. There were no entertainment systems.
Right.
So we've got the AM radio tuned up, and we hear the Pentagon's been hit. And we look over, and yep, it just got hit.
So you're seeing all this real time.
Yeah, and I'll come back to that. But now we're skedaddling as fast as we can. We got to Charleston, and over the air traffic control radio, they announced a what do they call that? A global aviation emergency was being declared. Well, no pilot in America had ever heard that term, so it didn't really mean a lot to me. So we kept going. So we get to, and at about this, no, somewhere in there, we're talking to controllers, and they go, where do you want to go? I go, we're going to Orlando. They go, fine. And this was before Delta bought Northwest, and there was a Northwest guy behind us. He said, we're just going to follow Delta. So the two of us are going as fast as we can. We get to Savannah, Georgia, and this air traffic controller said, are you aware there's a global air traffic emergency, whatever? I go, yeah. And she goes, do you know what that means? And I go, no, I have no idea. She goes, you need to get on the ground or they're going to shoot you down. And the Northwest guy behind us, she goes, what do you want to do? I go, when you're flying an airliner, you don't go straight down. It takes you about 100 miles to go down. So we're looking at Jacksonville, Florida now. And I go, we'll land at Jacksonville. And any pilot who's ever flown above 10,000 feet knows you never get cleared to land until you're down on, close to the ground. We're at 23,000 feet. She said, you're cleared to land. Good luck. Wow. And the Northwest guy goes, yeah, we'll follow them. So we go ski-daddling down, and we land. And I'll never forget, all the passengers got off. And as I walked out the jetway, the terminal had been evacuated. And I watched the second tower crumble on the TV in one of the bars. Yeah. So that was an interesting time. And there's two other parts to it. I don't know if we got time, but the World Trade Center, the co-pilot in that airplane was my roommate in flight school, which is David Charlebois was the guy's name. And I didn't even find that out.
One of the pilots who flew into the World Trade Center?
American 77, the co-pilot was my roommate. And then, and the woman, the flight attendant whose son had gone to work that day.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, so he had a sponsor, from the company, and they were standing outside. We didn't find this out for 2 days. She didn't know. But they were standing outside when the first one got hit, and this guy said, let's get out of here. And they ran and got on the Staten Island ferry and went to Staten Island. But that was pretty interesting.
She didn't know for 2 days that her son
for 2 days. Yeah. Well, it's like my wife was trying to call me. We didn't talk. I was in a hotel there in Jacksonville, 6 hours before she could get through because all the cell lines crashed. I mean, it was just overwhelmed everything. And then the weirdest part of this story is Delta didn't know where we were. We were lost. Every airliner was lost. Everybody was sorting it all out. Aviation was shut down across the planet. And 2 days later, my dispatcher finally got a hold of me. And he said, I want you to go out to the airport. I want you to wear your civilian clothes. You and your co-pilot, you're going to ferry a 737 down to Fort Lauderdale. Now I'm like, what? The skies are closed. And he's like, oh, you'll have an F-18 escort from Cecil. And I'm like, no. I mean, you're going to shoot me down. And I don't know why. Why would you do that to me? But he's like, no. We're repositioning airplanes to reset the whole system.
Why would he want you in a civilian clothes instead of your captain's uniform?
I have no idea.
They never explained that?
No. And it was really confusing. I called my wife. And I told her, I go, I think I'm being set up to be shot down or blown up or something. And, she didn't like to hear that. But, I didn't know what to do, so I did it. Me and the co-pilot went out to the airport. Of course, it was...
No one else on the airplane, just you and the co-pilot?
Nobody else at the airport except a cop. And he knew I was coming. And then a mechanic...
And you still had fuel.
Yep.
They never touched your plane after y'all all got off, right?
Correct, yeah, and they just wanted us to go down to Fort Lauderdale. So we go back out to the airplane, mechanic comes out, hook up the APU, crank us up, and we go taxiing out, and there's 4 F-18s sitting there at the end of the runway. I'm like, dude, this is not good.
Are you talking to the F-18s, or you don't have direct contact?
No, they have UHF radios, we have VHF radios. And so we're not talking. The tower, I don't believe there was a tower open. I think we just cleared ourselves for takeoff. We go running down the runway. They take off. They pull up alongside of us, and I'm like, "This is how it ends."
Do they salute you like, "Hey, where you got your?"
No, they didn't. They didn't close enough. And we just made a beeline down to Fort Lauderdale. We started descending, and probably around Fort Pierce or somewhere like that, they're gone. and a Navy T-39, which was a Saberliner,
Right.
pulled up alongside of us, and he followed us all the way to landing, and that was the end of that. But I have no idea what we were doing. You know,
No one's ever explained it?
no, the industry didn't reset for like another week. There was no reason for us to move an airplane. And for all I know, outside of the military, we're the only civilian airplane in the sky that day. And I think we were. It was just a really weird deal.
And to today, you've never had any explanation.
No, Delta. I don't even, maybe Delta knew. I don't even know if they knew. I mean, they were
Right.
just told to get this airplane from point A to point B.
I don't know if you have listened to many episodes of the podcast, but a few months ago we had Santa on here.
Oh,
and
really?
He was talking about airline pilots
Yeah.
and how he held you guys in such high regard.
Santa's a smart man.
He is. He didn't have much positive to say about the Navy guys, but
Yeah,
he spoke highly
I can understand that.
of Air Force guys and airline pilots.
Right.
So you're in good company there.
Hey, listeners.
Hey everyone.
Hola.
Hi all.
Hello, everybody. Hello. This is Rob Palumbo.
This is Fred Hyde.
This is Juliet Ashley Vide.
Dr. Angela Garcia Falconetti.
This is Congressman Scott Franklin.
This is Margie Grant.
This is Jake Palumbo.
And I want to thank you for listening to Todd's podcast.
Thank you for listening to Todd's podcast.
Thank you for listening to Todd's podcast.
Please make sure that you like and or subscribe.
Don't forget.
Don't forget.
Don't forget to subscribe to Todd's podcast on your favorite podcast app. Tune in and listen.
Join in and listen to us.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So after you got out of the military, you were doing the reserves. You had to do something else with yourself. What did you do? You're an entrepreneur. You're in different businesses.
Well, I finally got back to agriculture. And right here in Haines City, Jerry Mixon and Keith Mixon had a company called Sunny Ridge. I went over, talked to them. I didn't own any land. I just had a little piece. And I wanted to grow something that I could grow, number one, that would grow here in Florida and would make a lot of money.
Were you going to be on the production side with the blueberries, or the harvesting side, or selling?
Just
on
a farmer.
production?
I just want to be a
You're
farmer.
just a farmer.
And we had bought a house in the back of one of Gapway's groves.
Yep.
Talked them into selling me a couple of acres. We started growing blueberries, and one thing led to another, and that's where I'm at today. I mean, it took off. We got in that business at a very good time. It didn't take a lot of land or a lot of fruit to make a decent amount of money. And
Tough business now, though, isn't it?
it's horrible. Yeah, I mean,
Is it because everybody's gotten in? I shouldn't say everybody. A lot of people have gotten into it, or is it just the industry in
the
general?
world has gotten into it. I'll give you an
has.
example. At one point in time, I was president of the Florida Blueberry Growers Association, and I went up to talk to the University of Florida about how they were giving these new varieties to everybody but Florida growers. And at that time, they were getting ready to give Peru all the Florida varieties. Well, that was 10, 12 years ago, whatever. This year, well, not this year, I'll come back to that, but last year, Peru produced more blueberries than any country in the world, more than the United States and Canada combined.
Wow.
U.S. and Canada, maybe 500 million pounds of fresh blueberries. Peru, 600 million pounds of fresh blueberries. And we're competing with, $2 an hour labor. Everything's cheap, and you don't have to, they follow no rules. They do what they want. And that's our competition. So how we've stayed competitive is we switched over to organic blueberries.
Okay.
Now that's kept us in business. But Mexico and Peru are now switching over to organic. So to stay ahead of the game, we're going to go to machine harvesting.
Okay.
And I think once we do that, we can sit back and compete
Again for a while until something else comes along.
Yeah.
You're a county commissioner.
Yep.
I served a couple years with you. You're still there. So I want to ask you a couple of questions. I don't want to get too deep in the politics of it, but just kind of your feelings of what's going on. Traffic and congestion is a huge concern for Polk County people, Orange County people, probably anyone listening to this podcast, which is 78 billion people.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
We had a bump since Christmas.
Okay, good.
And
I like to hear myself on the radio.
Yeah, anyone who is sitting in traffic knows of traffic and congestion.
Right.
What's the county's attitude towards it? It seems like we've saturated Northeast Polk County. To me, the next growth area is Lake Wales and moving south. You got high ground.
Yeah. I mean,
every time a house is built, a citrus grove or a blueberry grove goes away. So
Yeah.
that's got to be a
And
struggle.
you know this as well as I, that this is the least popular part of the job.
Yep.
Land use decisions, right there with property taxes, but neither one is fun to do.
But the land use decisions have incredible significance to people's quality of life too.
Right,
Not
right.
just the taxes, but everything.
Yeah, and you know, again, I can't speak for the board. I can only speak for myself. You know, right now we're in the process of modifying our comprehensive plan to encourage what I would call better quality growth.
What does that mean?
Well, I'll give you a good example. Right now, a builder can come in and they can build a subdivision and put houses only 5 feet away from the property line.
So that's 10 feet away from each other.
Yeah. So, you know, what I want to see is a 10-foot setback on the sides. And if it's going to be, residential low, there's no waving that down. And you can go right around and look at the developments that are 10 foot versus 5 foot, and it looks completely different. You know, you look at the 5-footers and you go, this is going to be a bunch of rental homes in 10 years, and then a ghetto 10 years after that. I mean, that's the way it goes.
I think you can also look at the eaves. If it's got a 6 or 8 inch eave, you know, that's one thing. You get out to a 2-foot eave, which is kind of an older
Right.
style home. Again, that more barrier and, you know,
yeah,
a little more room for the lots.
Yeah, and of course, a lot of it's what I call the I'm on board, pull the rope up kind of attitude. You know, people move here from everywhere, and once they move here and they got an orange grove in their backyard, they think that orange grove is going to be in their backyard for the rest
And
of
then
their
they
life.
can pick those oranges.
Yeah, that too. But you know, I my view is a little different. You know, maybe it's from the agricultural side, but I look at it this way. You know, citrus is dead in Florida. I mean, there are some guys still fighting it, but they're going to find out they're going to lose. And there's a lot of creative ideas coming up to try to make citrus come back, but it's never, ever going to be what it was. And these guys, these citrus groves, and most of these developments are coming from abandoned citrus groves. These guys,
Because it was high ground.
yeah, exactly. It's all sand and all that. But these guys, these families, some of them have been here over 100 years. Their families have employed thousands, if not tens of thousands of people. They paid millions of dollars in property tax. You can remember, like I can remember, the Citrus Festival we used to have. They sponsored that. They sponsored clubs and parades and all this kind of stuff. Now these guys want to cash out. And I'm not going to hold a guy down from cashing out because I think they deserve to cash out. Right. You know, they've been exceptional citizens. Our county's economy was based on these guys for decades.
Right.
And so now they want out. Well, nobody's going to go buy their land for some exorbitant price except the home builder because he can turn it around and make some money off of it. So you've got that side of it. You know, but we as a commission have to operate kind of like as a homeowner association in that we're not going to tell you exactly what you can and can't do. You know, when you buy property in Florida, I believe you ought to be able to do with it up to a degree what you want to do with it. You know, it's like you don't want me coming over
Private property, right?
Yeah, you don't want me to come over to your house and say I don't like the blue paint. You know, paint it green. And so we try not to do that, you know, in the land use cases. But so these people come in, these developers come in, they want to do this or do that. We look at it. Now, I will say this, and one thing we're trying to encourage more of, and most people don't get this. I would rather see denser developments clustered together as opposed to way out here. There's a big development over here. You know, that to me makes less sense than the way we're approaching it. Now, what does that mean? That means in those areas of higher density, there's worse traffic. People don't like that. You know, I tell people, take a snapshot of today, and this is the best traffic you'll see the rest of your life. And why I say that is we can't pave our way out of this. We can't put up enough red lights. You know, all you got to do, if you've been here long enough, drive down I-4, go to Orlando. It's been widened, I don't know how many times. How many interchanges have been put on there? And the traffic is worse now than it's ever been. And it's not going to get any better. So we live in a place people want to come to, and we can't tell them they can't come here. We can affect the quality. You know, one of the things we're going to do, is these developers are going to have to put playgrounds, more recreational stuff, because these kids have nowhere to go.
Right.
You know, there's not a park on every corner. So, you know, we've got to do that sort of stuff. Traffic, you know, we'll keep working on, you know, the Pipkins, the, you know, Thompson Nursery, the 557s, we'll widen them. And I think people need to take a deep breath, and they're not going to like this, but sit back, wait for these roads to open. These are going to handle some of the bad traffic. But the reality is when you come to Florida, you got certain rights, property rights, like you said, and I think that's the right way to do it.
And you had just mentioned about working with developers and doing some parks. The county, I think, does a pretty good job building regional parks.
Yeah.
We build beautiful projects, but it's the little pocket parks of whatever you want to call it to satisfy a smaller neighborhood park, pocket park, depending on which person you talk to.
And that's got to fall more on the
So
builder.
it sounds like that's what you're leaving that up to is more on the local developer is, hey, you got to help. We got the big quality of life. You got the little quality of life.
Yeah, and we had just modified our comp plan here last year, and then the state legislature took all those modifications away through Senate Bill 250.
Aren't they special?
Yeah, I'm not going to get into that. But the good news is all that changed this past Monday.
Right.
The governor more or less overturned their own legislation. We're back on track to working toward, better quality developments. Right. And again, parks, sidewalks, all these things. I want to see a little more spacing. Parking is a nightmare in these developments. We've got larger setbacks from the road to allow 2 cars to park back to back.
Because a lot of these houses, people live out of their garage or they put their stuff in the garage. So then their cars don't go in the garage, they go in the driveway. And the rear ends of their cars or trucks hang over the sidewalk. And then you got another one on both sides of the road. Ambulances and fire trucks can't get down. So there's public safety that goes along with that.
Yeah, and people don't, and they have to realize there's a lot of people that don't want a yard.
Right.
It's a couple. They don't want to mow the grass. They want a place for their dog to run and do his business and bring him back inside, and that's it. And there's a lot of that being built. And again, I don't think people are going to necessarily like to hear this, but I like seeing more apartments coming into the county. I mean,
I think there has been.
Oh yeah, there's a lot right now.
There's a little bit of a pause right now, but we've still got developers who are looking for multifamily land as well.
And I think the economy, no matter how bad it gets, it's Florida. People want to move here. They like the politics. They like
better to be here than California or New York or Illinois or
they like the taxes. It's better.
Speaking of public safety, our sheriff is very well known. But public safety is more than just our police and sheriff's department. It's also fire, it's ambulance rescue. Are we always playing catch up there? Are we never able to get ahead of the curve, do you think?
No, I don't think that at all. I think you were there when we refocused the emphasis on public safety, and that was fire and ambulance.
And salaries, to start paying these men and women a better wage. Yeah. I noticed when I was there, I saw sign flippers were making more than some of our ambulance drivers.
Right.
I went, wait, a guy flipping a sign's making more than a guy or gal driving our ambulance?
And for a long time, it wasn't, it's all fire rescue, one department, but it was the rescue side, the ambulance side that was really getting the short end of the stick. I think we've addressed that. I think they're up to like $10,000 signing bonuses. The pay's dramatically increased. That's how you address that. On top of the fact, we've hired more of them. We've bought a lot of ambulances. We're in the process of building 12 brand new fire stations.
Right.
And one thing we're incorporating in those is, the concept, or not the concept, the reality is firefighters get cancer more often than a lot of groups, and it's from all the smoke and all the crap that's on their outfit when they get back. Well, we now have decontamination rooms in the fire stations.
To put their gear.
Yeah.
So they're not taking their gear into where they're living.
Better sleeping quarters. As well as I, when I came on the board in 2016, we had ambulance drivers living in campers in Lake Wales. I mean, that was embarrassing.
The motel room down at whatever city that was down there is like, wait a minute, this is just not right.
It's embarrassing. So
sleeping in their truck would have been better than sleeping in the hotels they were in.
We've addressed these. Yep. Have we solved them? No, because whether it's ambulance, paramedics, or firefighters, you can't find a city or county that's got enough.
Right.
There's a shortage. I don't know if that's ever going to remedy itself. There's always going to be a shortage, and they chase the pay like every other occupation. So, but I think we've made a huge dent in it.
So how hard is it to find employees? I mean, I know it's.
You looking for a job?
Not anymore. We've been blessed here at my office that we've got a very stable workforce, but I know the private sector is always complaining that, well, the county's stealing our smart people,
Oh, yeah,
and the
yeah.
county's saying, well, our guys and gals are going to work for this company in the private. And in all honesty, you're a business, so
Yeah.
you do have to try and find the best and the brightest. To
It's
deliver the
ridiculously
services.
difficult. I mean, I'm sure every job classification at the county needs an employee. We're short somewheres. It's just like on the firefighters, and it's something me and the county manager have gone back and forth over. We as you know, we approve so many slots for every department,
Right.
And then it's their job to fill them. And I think we're 60 or 80 short just in fire, but we're going to fund these 60 jobs, knowing we're not going to fill them. And that always bothers me. I'd rather just say, look, maybe we'll get a dozen guys this year. Let's take that money and do something else with it. But maybe they're just endlessly positive that they're going to fill these jobs. But employees are tough. And one thing you said, it's not private poaching government, it's government poaching government now.
Right.
We see Lakeland pays more than the county, boop, they go over there.
Right.
Tampa pays more than Lakeland, boop, they go over there. So
And if they're all part of the Florida retirement system,
exactly.
it doesn't matter where their
That's
paycheck
right.
comes
That's
from.
right.
Kind of getting towards the end of the podcast, I want to talk about the environment a little bit.
Yeah.
Environmental lands. The county's put some energy and effort into that. Can you tell us what's going on with that?
I think it's a big deal, and I think we're certainly headed in the right direction. The state of Florida, for a long time, has looked at some of these swamps and environmentally sensitive lands and said, we got to protect them from developers. And the way they've done that, as you well know in your office, is they've got the state to basically buy either the land or buy development rights of it, which something that's real interesting on the state level. The Commissioner of Agriculture, Wilton Simpson, he is very actively trying to get the state to sell all of the environmental lands they've purchased and basically sell them with an environmental easement on it. And I think it's a great idea, and I'll tell you why. Because number one, they go back into producing taxes,
And they produce taxes with an ag exemption, so
and
they produce $3.
Yeah, no, ag pays more than you think.
I know.
But anyways, but they're productive. They go back into farming. They go back into ranching, that sort of thing. But what we did, the voters chose to tax themselves,
Right.
And we're taking that money right now. We figure it's about $13 million a year. We've got a group of technical people who are environmental scientists, that sort of thing, water experts, and people can submit their property and say, we would like to get an environmental easement on this. And then they evaluate it, and we're going through the first evaluations. As a matter of fact, our last meeting, I believe it was 5 or 6 pieces of property we approved to begin negotiating with the landowners to see if they really want to sell it. And that's kind of the government's tool to protect land like that. Right. Now, as a pilot and a guy that flies, I look down on Florida, I go, we ain't running out of space anytime soon. I mean, it just, I remember Adam Putnam always talked about all the people are just outside the interstates, 95 and 75. You go to the middle, there's nothing.
Right.
And it really does look that way from the air. But where we're at, we're connecting Orlando and Tampa, and spaces on that corridor are certainly getting a little bit tight.
So kind of getting away from that, and we're just about out of time. What do you do to blow off steam? What are your hobbies? I know you don't play golf anymore, it doesn't sound like, but what do you do when you go home and you're just wrung out from a wonderful day of conversation with the public?
With a podcast guy or something like that.
This is the highlight of your career, I know it.
So I'm extremely fortunate. My son lives on the other side of the blueberry farm. We're just far enough that we don't kill each other. And they have three daughters, which I have 3 granddaughters, 10, 3, and 1. And that's my spare time as I spend with them. The 10-year-old, I take her to school every morning. Kathy picks her up most afternoons. She comes to the house. We do whatever. We go somewhere. We play cards. We go swimming. And I'm again, I've been very fortunate. I've got to travel the world many times over. I've seen everything. I've been everywhere. I'm kind of tired of going. I like to stay home. I've become a homebody. And
well, I don't know your 3 and your 1-year-old, but I do know Cammie, your 10-year-old.
Yep.
And I'm going to tell you, the most fun I've ever had are being on Christmas parade floats and your granddaughter came on there with us, and she started singing.
God bless America.
Yes, and she's like 3, 4, 5 years old.
Yeah.
And we wrestled the microphone away from Melanie Bell, which was an effort in itself.
Yeah, it's like taking a camera from Grady.
There you go. And your granddaughter Cammie starts singing, and all the crowd is going crazy. And it was so fun to be on that float with her. And if your other two are as much fun as she is,
they're so much fun. And Cammie's really into soccer now. She's on the travel team at 10 years old. And
she's 10 years old.
Yeah, and the Taylor just turned 3, but when she was 2, she went on a soccer team.
Wow.
Now that's funny. I mean, that's just hilarious because nobody cares about the ball. They're chasing birds and, whatever, picking their nose or whatever.
So last question, are you a reader? Do you you talked about taking 30 periodicals. You read a lot?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
You're a social media star, I'm assuming?
No. I just like to read. Lately, the book everybody's what do you recommend to read? The End of the World is Just a Beginning by Peter Zier. I love that book. I've read it twice. He's written several other books I've read. That's what I'm reading right now.
I would suggest Leadership at 100 Feet, written by some guys that you know. It's an excellent, easy read book.
Yeah, big letters and all that.
Not that big, but it's all Air Force guys.
Oh, okay, all right.
So, but I want to. Anything else that I didn't ask you that you thought I would? Is there anything else you want to tell us before you go? Because we've been here coming up on an hour, and I appreciate the time that you've given us today.
No, I'm good. I enjoyed being here.
I know you missed me on the commission.
Terribly. Are you going to run again?
No.
You sure?
Yeah, I'm positive.
Yeah, okay. All
so
right.
I'm good.
So this real estate gig's working for you, huh?
The last couple of years have been okay for us.
Okay.
So.
All right.
But I do appreciate you taking the time, come down. I do appreciate all your service to us through the military and now through elected office. And people don't give you enough credit, I don't think, or a lot of people don't give enough people credit for their public service.
Sure.
And you have done that. You've been
I live to serve.
I know, but you've been a good friend of mine since we've met each other and gotten to know each other. I enjoyed the 2 years, so I appreciate it. I wish you well with whatever lies in front of you, especially with your grandkids. It sounds like that's kind of rounding out your life pretty well.
Pretty much.
And I wish you good luck with that. So
thanks, Todd. I enjoyed it.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Eli. Hey, everybody, I want to thank you for listening to Todd's podcast. This has been your host, Todd Dantzler. If you enjoyed the episode today, tune in next time where we'll be talking to Trey Mancini, who's a Major League Baseball player. He was the American League Comeback Player of the Year in 2021 after having colon cancer and his recovery from that. We talk a little bit about his foundation, the Trey Mancini Foundation, life in the majors. As always, don't forget to rate, review, follow, and subscribe to Todd's podcast on your favorite podcast app. If you have any questions for me or any suggestions for future guests, please call or text our number at 863-288-0944 or visit todddantzler.com. Again, that's 863-288-0944 or visit my website, todddantzler.com. I look forward to hearing your questions and feedback, and please take care.